You're watching Behavior Bits.
Hello, and welcome to Twin Rivers Special Education Paraeducators Resource Guide. In this PowerPoint, we will be addressing professionalism and working as a team with teachers and other professionals to support our students. We will also be providing a general overview of your roles and responsibilities as a paraeducator. We will then be reviewing some characteristics and instructional strategies for autism, emotional disability, and attention deficit hyperactive disorder. We will also discuss how to incorporate positive behavioral strategies and supports to create independence, which takes us into promoting independence. Our goal is to assist students in becoming as independent as possible and to help them do great things. Professionalism. Students with disabilities have a hard time with changes. Therefore, it is important to be punctual and attend work regularly. If you are unable to attend, please communicate with your case manager and request a sub as soon as possible. In addition, communication is key. Please discuss a student's progress with only teachers or case managers who are responsible for that student's instruction. Therefore, all communication with parents is a teacher's responsibility. That includes text messages, emails, and phone calls. Refer any parent inquiries regarding student progress to the student's teacher. Working in the classroom requires you to be flexible and willing to assist when possible. If your student is successful and independent, you may then be able to feedback and assist the class as a whole. We will now be reviewing the roles of teachers and paraeducators. The overall teacher's role is to develop the student's IEP goals and make the appropriate accommodations and modifications as necessary and communicate that with you. They will also assess and determine the appropriate use of a communication device if the student has difficulties verbally. They will also inform you if there is any data to be collected. And lastly, teachers and case managers will be the ones to communicate all student progress. If parents come to you with questions or concerns, always redirect to the teacher. As a paraeducator, you will be the one to implement the type of assistive technology that was decided upon. You will also collect data as requested. If the student has a behavior plan, you will be the one to carry out those strategies and collect data as needed. You will also communicate all of the students' progress or concerns to the teacher. And lastly, you will encourage your students to play appropriately with their peers across the day. Question number 1. The parent of your student asks you for your number to text you if he or she will be absent the following day due to a doctor's appointment. You A, give them your number, or B, refer them to the teacher. The answer is B, refer them to the teacher. It is important to note that all parent communication should be directed to the teacher or case manager. Students with disabilities. Every student has strengths and weaknesses, and it is our job to identify them and support them. Children with disabilities need more patience and understanding than the average student. Let's now review the characteristics and instructional strategies for autism, emotional disability, also known as ED, and attention deficit hyperactive disorder, also known as ADHD. Characteristics of autism. These characteristics include verbal and nonverbal communication. Keep in mind that some students might have great verbal skills and others may have none. Another characteristic is narrow interest, such as only wanting to talk about certain things such as stop signs. And then there's also stereotype behaviors that include hand flapping or spinning. Another characteristic is having difficulties to environmental change and daily routines, such as assemblies or not being told of a schedule change. Another characteristic is engaging in repetitive behaviors such as spinning the wheel of a car over and over. They also have difficulty with being literal and concrete in their thinking. For example, students with autism may have a difficult time with idioms, such as saying, "It's raining cats and dogs." Having unusual responses to sensory experience is another characteristic of autism, such as noises or loud sounds like a hand dryer in the restroom. Furthermore, varying levels of intelligence and ability, and lastly, social skills difficulties with peers such as turn taking and sharing. Instructional strategies for autism. These instructional strategies include getting the student's attention before giving an instruction, such as stating their name before giving that instruction, providing structure, consistency, and routine. This includes visual schedules, a daily schedule, a color coding system, or names or pictures of students on chairs or desks to identify their area. Also, allowing enough time for students to respond. More instructional strategies include limiting the number of verbal prompts, so telling the student what they should do once and then follow up with a least to most intrusive prompt. Let's provide choices when possible, such as asking the student to choose between a pencil or a crayon when they're writing their name. The use of verbal supports is such as a picture of a sit down or quiet mouth is used to redirect off-task behavior, and preparing students for transitions and changes in the schedule. Characteristics of emotional disturbance. These characteristics include having inappropriate types of behaviors or feelings, being uncooperative and non-compliant, be withdrawn such as limiting eye contact, unwilling to talk, or prefers to be alone, has a low self-esteem, has a difficult time with social skills and interacting with others, may resist authority, has poor coping skills, social skills, and self-control, and can have a behavior if they feel they have lost control, and may show signs of anxiety. Instructional strategies for ED. These instructional strategies include setting clear rules, boundaries, and expectations, and making sure they understand. Another instructional strategy is to learn the student's triggers, such as what causes those outbursts and behaviors, and then identifying the appropriate strategies to support our students. We should also avoid a power struggle or verbal argument by providing 2 acceptable things you'd like them to do. Encourage the use of self-control strategies such as deep breathing, taking a break, and so on. Let's make sure to follow the behavior plan and avoid the use of any physical restraint. These physical restraints can escalate to aggressive behavior because it can trigger a traumatic event in their past. Characteristics of attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Typically, children with ADHD have developmentally inappropriate behaviors, including hyperactivity that is usually referred as constant activity. Another characteristic is impulsivity, which is making decisions quickly rather than thinking it through. Inattention. Inattention can be defined as not being able to attend or can be easily distracted, which makes it hard to focus. They may also lack social skills with their peers. They may also have poor organization skills and can be observed having a cluttered desk, not being able to find papers, or not being able to find work or materials. They can also fail to give attention to details and make careless mistakes. They have varied perception of time, such as difficult tasks may seem like they take a very long time, or preferred tasks maintain their attention for longer periods of time. And lastly, having difficulty following through with directions and completing assignments, as well as difficulty with problem solving. Instructional strategies for ADHD. One of the greatest things to do is to minimize distractions. This can be accomplished by using dividers on desks to limit some of those distractions. We want to provide an uncluttered workspace with lots of structure and routine. We can assign specific folders for each subject, provide a pencil box for materials, and we can create a checklist to cross off items when completed. We should also be providing organizational tools and strategies, as well as break their assignments into smaller chunks in which they may be successful. In addition, the use of color coding, timers, and modified instruction can be effective with this type of disability. Question number 2. Should paraeducators assist in carrying out programs of support staff like speech and language pathologists or an occupational therapist? A, yes, or B, no? The answer is A, yes. In this next part, we are going to get into understanding behavior. What we are trying to figure out is what the function is. Once identified, we can provide the appropriate strategies. Most behavior serves 4 basic functions. The first one is to gain attention from staff or peers. This can be positive attention, such as a verbal praise or a high five. as well as negative attention, also known as reprimands. So telling a student no hitting will not be effective. The other one is to escape or avoid non-preferred tasks or demands, such as refusing to not comply with the instruction, either physically, such as running away from table work, or verbally protesting, such as stating no. Another function is to gain access to preferred items and/or activities, such as the iPad or music class. And lastly is to receive sensory input, such as squeezes or hugs to feel a tight pressure on their bodies. Just remember, behavior is a means of communication. Consider what the student is trying to tell you within the behavior. Is she hungry? Do they need attention? Are they saying, I need more time? Or are they just saying, no, thank you? In the next few slides, we will be discussing positive behavior strategies. Let me start this section by stating that consistency is key. We should be reminding students of expectations throughout the day by reviewing classroom rules and placing those rules around the classroom. These reminders prior to the transition of an activity is setting student expectations and success. This will ensure we are being proactive when assisting with behavior management by setting structure and routine in an environment that supports learning. When communicating with students, state directions and expectations in a simple, explicit, and positive manner. Tell the students what they are supposed to do. For instance, instead of saying don't run, say please walk in the halls. Another strategy is to encourage and reinforce age-appropriate behavior. For example, during free time, create opportunities to teach turn-taking and sharing. Another example is during recess. Encourage students to request a turn with the ball rather than pushing peers to get access. Another positive behavior strategy is to offer students choices to avoid a power struggle. For example, rather than say don't tap your pencil, state would you rather put your pencil in your pencil case or in your desk? This leads to the next strategy. When possible, ignore attention-seeking behaviors that are not disruptive to the classroom, such as the removal of their shoes. Teachers can also inform you when to ignore and not ignore. We should be providing positive reinforcement throughout the day by catching your students being good. Keep in mind that when doing so, make sure to say what you like about the behavior. For example, rather than just saying good job, say, I like the way you raised your hand to participate. Make sure to also vary your verbal ways to positively reinforce students with awesome, or I know you could do it, or you figured it out all by yourself. And lastly, avoid focusing on punitive consequences or loss of privileges. Research suggests that teachers and support staff should offer praise statements more often than corrective statements. Researchers have recommended a 5-to-1 ratio, meaning for every 1 correction or reprimand, you should also be providing 5 positive statements or interactions. Let's review 3 examples of reinforcement. The first one is a first-then board. This type of example is a visual verbal strategy used to help children with language and/or behavior needs to complete specific tasks. The first is a non-preferred task such as table work, followed by then, which is the reinforcer. So as we can see to the right, there we have a first-then board that states as follows: first work, then computer. The second example is a token board. A student using a token board receives tokens immediately after displaying desirable behavior, such as staying in his seat, following instructions, and keeping hands to self. The tokens are then collected and exchanged for a preferred object or activity. To the right is an example of a token board. We would ask the student what he is working for. The third example is a behavior contract. A behavior contract spells expectations of the student and the consequence for meeting the expectations. The consequence is a reinforcer that the student wants to work to earn. Some target behavior examples are staying in his seat, listening and following directions, or will not run or walk away from the teacher. Question number 3. My student chooses to work for iPad time by earning tokens during circle time. That includes following instructions, staying in his seat, and participating. He raises his hand and waits to be called on. I say, A, good job, Or B, I like how you raised a quiet hand. The answer is B. When offering positive reinforcement, state what you like about the behavior. We have now reached the section that ties in all the instructional strategies and positive behavior strategies for one main purpose, to promote independence. Our overall goal is to help our students gain an independent skill set to be successful in life. We want to encourage students to be independent rather than dependent. The following strategies are encouraged to promote independence. The first is to find ways and use strategies that allow students to make choices and decisions. For example, using a choice wheel of circle time songs is a great visual reminder to encourage students to make a choice and participate. Another strategy is to sit or stand at a distance from the student who requires support. We want to provide opportunities for them to complete activities as independently as possible prior to offering support. We also want to allow students to make mistakes and experience natural consequences, that is, unless there is a safety issue. We should be feeding to a coaching and indirect support role as soon as possible. And lastly, we should recognize the importance of peer modeling of appropriate behavior and point out examples of effective behavior and its consequences. Natural supports enhance students' independence and social acceptance. Utilizing the prompt hierarchy to facilitate student independence. A prompt hierarchy refers to different levels of support provided to assist a student who is learning or demonstrating a task. As we review the different types of prompts, we will use the example of a student learning the hand washing routine. The different levels of prompts are sequenced from least to most assistance. So let's start by using the least amount of support, the social prompt. The social prompt requires you to make a facial expression such as an eye gaze to the sink. A gesture prompt. A gesture prompt requires you to point to the task in which communicates to the student what to do. For example, pointing to the water tap to begin washing hands. Model prompt. A model prompt requires you to demonstrate the correct response for the student and the student imitates the model. For example, I turn the water on, then the student imitates and turns the water on. Partial physical. A partial physical prompt requires you to touch the student to elicit a response. For example, I may slightly touch his or her elbow in the direction of the water tap to prompt the water on. Full physical. A full physical prompt requires you to provide hand-over-hand guidance to help the student complete the desired task. So I will place my hand over his hand to turn the water on. Verbal prompt. A verbal prompt requires you to tell the student what he or she is expected to do, such as saying, water on. Avoid dependency, also known as the Velcro support. Some ways to avoid dependency is to not sit or stand right next to the student. We can observe them across the classroom. Let's provide opportunities for students to complete activities independently as possible before providing support. We do not need to accompany the student everywhere. If the student gets up to sharpen his or her pencil, we do not need to be there. Sitting, standing, following our students everywhere can lead to dependence on adults and can also harm relationships with their peers. A lot of times we see peers avoiding our students who have an adult present at all times. Remember to always use the least intrusive prompts when possible. Make sure you are feeding prompts according to the prompt hierarchy and watch out for those unintended or inadvertent prompts such as talking with your hands. Question number 4. The teacher has instructed students to begin their work. The student is looking down at his worksheet but has not started yet. I should A. Repeat the instruction, do your work, or B. Wait, allow time for processing. The answer is B. This level of prompt requires a teacher to expectantly wait for the student to perform the task or follow the direction. While waiting, the teacher or paraeducator is observing the student's behavior to determine if further prompting is needed. Question number 4. The teacher has instructed students to begin their work. The student is looking down at his worksheet but has not started yet. I should A. Repeat the instruction, do your work, or B. Wait, allow time for processing. The answer is B. This level of prompt requires a teacher to expectantly wait for the student to perform the task or follow the direction. While waiting, the teacher or paraeducator is observing the student's behavior to determine if further prompting is needed.
Thanks for watching Behavior Bits.